Hey, folks, we're back at it again with another episode of the Selling Bliss podcast. And I got my main man, Landon Meyer, here with me. How are you?
I'm good, Brian. Thanks for getting me on here. I know we've been doing a little bit of back and forth for a while, but super excited to talk shop with you.
Yeah, man, you were hard to close. I had to be persistent. I had to pull out all the tricks. I had to throw some memes in to get you, but you're a man in demand. And, kind of the crazy thing is I was trying to hire you back in Q4. And so, I'm super excited to talk to, someone who I think is one of the coolest practitioners on the SDR side out there right now. You recently, our timing didn't quite align, but you took a new role in Q4. Can you share a little of what that role is and what you're doing these days?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for interviewing me at that time. I had gotten laid off and you had reached out, and it was such a great conversation. And the stars aligned the way they do. But
Yep.
yeah, I was talking with Anomalo, which is where I work now. And at the time I was going through 12 interviews, right? And Anomalo was my VP. I roll up to marketing. He lives here in Santa Cruz. And from me posting on LinkedIn, I got introduced to him by someone that I'm not even connected with, but they said they followed me and they love my content. And so they've been following my journey. So they introduced me to Rich. Rich reached out to me and he's like, hey, we're looking to bring on our first SDR. We would love to interview you, learn a little bit more about you. And I was like, hey, Rich, I'm interviewing with 12 people. Like, I'd love to move this forward. I did 7 interviews in like 8 days or something crazy where they just ran me through the gamut, and I got to meet the whole team and got to do a little bit more research on the founders. Like, when you work at so many different startups, like, you get to understand like what you're looking for in a company outside of the product, outside of who we're selling to as personas, and what's the ICP and how much funding do they have. And I was so happy to be able to leverage these new skills that I gained and just perspective on like, what am I actually really looking for? Like, what do I want to do? Like, I
Yeah.
want to go change companies again. So like, this is fast, but like, I spent a lot of time in between interviews just putting my heart and soul into this process and making sure I was aligning on my core values with them and interviewing them as well. And it's worked out really well. I mean, I'm just so excited I deliberately wanted out of sales tech to get back into product and engineering in the data space. And I'm just so thankful that I actually made it happen.
Yeah. And I mean, let's take a step back, because so many people right now, layoffs are still happening, especially in tech, and people are figuring out what their next step is. And some people are being blindsided. You got hit with a layoff and you posted on LinkedIn and you had kind of this instant response, right? And then you said you were going through, but talk to us a little bit about like what that was like and what you attribute that to, and how you kind of shared, hey, here's what I'm looking for next.
Yeah, no, and I'm just so grateful for my LinkedIn brand that I built, right? Like, I just hit a year of posting, and to this day, I mean, I don't know how many times I've posted, but my most engaged post, the one with 500,000 views and over, I think, 1,200 comments, was my layoff post, right? And the way I approach my LinkedIn is I give back as much as I possibly can without asking for anything in return, not knowing that I would ever need to like use it, or but that's just like what I've learned to do in life is, right, you give, and it will come back to you in one way or the other. And when I was down and out and I was like, oh my God, how am I going to pay rent? Like, this sucks. Like, everyone's getting laid off. Like, and I went and posted just a story about like, it sucks having to walk out of your room. We're all remote and I got to go look at my 2 kids and my wife and be like, hey, I just got laid off from my 170K job, $1,000 a job. Like, what? Like, what are we going to do? And I was just super like upfront about it and open. And I ended up getting like 120 people reach out to me to want to interview me. And I wheedled it down to like 12. And Anomalo
Hey,
was,
I'm flattered I was in the top 10%. I at least made that cut.
I was loving that. Yeah, it was great.
And you mentioned like, hey, you started to look at some things that, because here's one of the things I really respect about you is that, if you look at your career, and I'd love for you to share a little bit more about that, it has not been like a straight line. And I think you've been really pragmatic and, kind of hey, instead of just chasing a title and then instead of like, let me replace this salary with a bigger salary, tell a little bit about your approach and then how that translated into, as you looked through the 12 different companies and sorted other ones even out from there, how you approach that and what mattered to you and what were you going in for?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it like started when I was at Workato. Like that was my first tech job. I started off as an inbound SDR in 2021. And dude, I was just always like so quick to want to jump to the next role. Like, I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was like new, shiny penny. I saw other people promotions, my ego, but I never actually just like sunk my feet in and like built a foundation on where I was. Like every 3 months, I was like, manager, like I hit quota, I exceeded, like, is it my time yet? No, not yet. Like we have a process, like, okay. And so that was my really bad habit is I just wanted the next thing. I wanted the pay bump. I wanted the new title. I wanted to show everyone that, I started as inbound SDR and now I'm an AE at this company. And just doing that back and forth at Workato and just being like, you know what, like I'm going to go become I need more money. I had my second kid. And I mean, granted, I did need more money, but like when you think about in the long term, when you look back at it, you're like, well, man, there's people that I was SDRs with at Workato now that are AEs and it's $100 million company. And, they're probably making 150, 160K a year. So like, it's hard to get out of that moment. You just want the next thing. And so I left and chased the money, right? Went somewhere that gave me 25K more. And then that just started the hungriness, more money. Now I'm going to buy more stuff. I'm going to move into a bigger place. And then I was like, you know what? I'm ready to be an AE. And I couldn't be an AE there because I was only there for 3 months, but I was still being like, hey, I'm the top performer, move me up. Right. And so then Nooks hit me up and more money, became an AE, went to Nooks, realized, whoa, this is a 10-person company, like solid people at Nooks, great product. It was just very early. And I was like, that's when I started building my brand. And then Falcon reached out to me. I left Nooks to go to Falcon to be with my VP at the time, and more money, right? Yep. Chased that again, and then ended up getting laid off. And so I think realization hit me where it's like there's more things important than money, like, right? Like money will come and go. Really, at the end of the day, what I'm looking for is I'm looking for peace around 4:30, 5 o'clock that I can close my computer and not feel like I'm going to have some type of pressure on me from my boss, or like, that means like the culture is not good, or there's just like these crazy goals that we're never going to attain because I'm working at a place that shouldn't be a product and we're going up market, and all of these things that you look at, and you put yourself in these situations. You interviewed, you thought you caught them, then you 2 months in, you're like, wait a second, no one's really buying this. Wait, we don't even have these customers that are on our website. What the heck is going on? Like, how did I get duped into this? So
it all sounds great up front, right?
Yeah, it's like a beautiful dream. And then all of a sudden you start getting a peek behind the curtain. And you're like, wait a second, this isn't right. Like, what did I do?
Hey, what are some of the things that like you feel like maybe you skipped in terms of basic foundational skills that now you're kind of honing and getting better at? What are some of the things, because you're doing really well now in the role, but like what did you kind of gloss over as you were hurrying to that next one and now you've taken a step back? What are the things you're filling out and learning?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say like just the end-to-end prospecting to booking a meeting. Like I was really good at finding myself in a position where all of a sudden I had an op, right? Whether it was like it slipped through inbound and like somehow it got associated to me in Salesforce and I had this op and I was like, oh, this is great. Like all those like lucky things would happen to me.
Yeah.
And I would, I'd raise my hand to get put on like LinkedIn ads, or they're not inbound, they're not really outbound, but like it's a little bit closer to get a conversation. I'm going to give you $250. You want to take a meeting with us to see this? Sure. I just want the $250. But that would turn into an op for me because that's how it worked then, right? And so what happened when I decided is that like prospecting, writing good emails, just being efficient in my day, like focused on pipeline generating activities, I didn't really have a plan. I didn't have a foundation. I had no structure. I would wing it on the phone, and I was just really good on the phone at just making people take a call, right?
Yep.
On how I've talked or my tone. Whether those calls move to, close one revenue, who knows, like
Right.
it wasn't what I was based off of. It was like, did they
Yeah.
show and did we have a call? Yeah, okay, I got it. And so what I really wanted to do while I was jumping back into the seat of a SDR is I wanted to be really good at prospecting, identifying accounts that match our ICP, that match our current customers, learning how to tell a better story through my messaging while not being, like making the messaging not long, like just all those little things that you should learn in your first 3 to 6 months that I just kind of skipped over because I was just kind of like hammering through and just like a bulldozer, and I would just call a bunch of people. And so I think now I'm more of an elegant SDR where I'm more focused on like the details
Yeah.
that are going to get me to quota, and I don't focus on booking the meetings. I focus on all the things that lead up to booking the meeting.
Yeah, that's cool. What has changed? Like you did so much on LinkedIn, and I think a lot of you were able to generate a ton from that. But it sounds like you've shifted. You're doing the phone more. What's been the biggest difference? Like, how have you learned to? Because picking up the phone can be intimidating. It's not an easy thing, and you're going to get slapped down. You're going to get a lot of no's, and it's a tough gig. So what have you learned, and how have you approached that?
Yeah, I think like the biggest thing for me that helped me kind of transition to being really good on the phones, or just being willing to get on the phones. I don't even necessarily, you don't need to be really good, but to
Yep.
get good, you got to get on the phones and get your, your reps in. But when I got introduced to Sandler training and scripting, like that
Mm,
changed the game for me. I don't use scripting to this day, but it was a foundation. It's kind of like when you use Lavender, the email tool,
sure.
right? You don't need to use Lavender for the rest of your life, but what it does is it kind of breaks this framework on how you write and structure your emails, where like it's hard to like get out of it, right? It's kind of like
Yep.
you're molded into that after using it for a month or two. And so having a foundation, having some type of framework on whether it's like, okay, how am I going to open this call? Like, what am I going to say after they say this? Like knowing exactly how I'm going to run it, but still making it sound like it's me, and like I'm able to have a conversation. It's not scripted. We can go off the cuff, and I can still get us back on. But like things I try to focus on is I try to keep the call under 2 minutes. I
Mhm.
don't think the phone you shouldn't be on. For me, you're most likely to just get into the weeds or start talking yourself out of a meeting if you're on there for
Right.
long for 2 minutes. Um, and switching up different openers and trying what works on different personas, and when you get like when you get denied, like write what you got denied on and then like lead with it the next time you call. Like I think a lot of SDRs, especially me in the early days, is I didn't do the little things. Like if someone was like, hey, I'm in a meeting, and I would say, okay, objection, I'm in a meeting. And then next time I call them, be like, hey, did I catch you before your next meeting? And so like
Right.
try to get in front of the objection because this person, that's what they like to use.
Yeah.
Um, but also like when it comes down to it, like you have to believe in the product. It doesn't have to be the best thing in your life. And it's not something that like you totally are like, oh, I'm so in love with it. The thing is, do you feel like your product solves a problem for the people you're calling? Because if it doesn't, then you're not going to like have that confidence, and then also you might not be reaching out to the right people. If you're portraying a one problem and you're reaching out to this person, of course it's not, and you're probably getting a lot of objections and not wanting them to see more. Like that should tell you like, hey, there's something off here. I'm saying this, they're reacting like this, and it's making me not want to pick up the phone. Well, it might not be that you're not good at the phone. It might just be you're calling the wrong person and trying to solve the wrong problem for the wrong person. And how
Yeah.
you're doing it. So a lot of it goes back to enablement and ICP and identification on the problems that you solve and what your value prop is.
I think authenticity, and the part that I think really resonates for me is just I always encourage, myself and anyone who's on my team, hey, put yourself in the other person's shoes. And so they're on the receiving end of this email, this video, this phone call, this LinkedIn message. How are they going to be thinking about it? What do they care about? And so when you're able to, and I think that goes to, if you can't put yourself in the person's shoes, you don't understand their problems, you don't understand what they're trying to solve for, then your messaging is never going to work. And I think that's such a critical part. And then, so you mentioned Sandler, and I think that, Sandler is, tried and true. It's been out there for a while. And my biggest belief on sales training is that, hey, there are lots of good ones out there. You got to pick one and you got to personalize it. So did you, when you're picking up the phone, do you have a script in front of you that you read off of, or like that first day or two, or are you just like bullet points? What's your strategy for that? Because I've never been a big one for like, let me script everything out, because then it sounds like you're reading a script, but like, I like to have bullet points in front of me. What do you do? What works for you when you're making those calls?
Yeah, I think it really depends on how many people, like how many personas you're calling into, right?
Yep.
Like for me, what works best is, so I call into like 4 to 5 different personas. All those people have different problems on how our product solves for them. So I task them by persona, so I don't have to jump back and forth between messaging. So if I'm calling a director of advanced advanced data analytics, like I'm going to call all of those directors of advanced data analytics. So I'm saying the same thing, and there's a lot of like, I can get a momentum, right? If I'm calling folks from data governance, I'm going to call all the data governance folks. And I usually just do it as like a Chipotle menu. I don't know. I learned that from Sandler. I don't know. Maybe I was actually from an ex-manager, but I'm not too sure. But like, you give them a choice on what avenue you want to go down to. You have to make sure though that it's broad enough to be like, they can't really say no. It's like, you you got to keep that kind of like, where they're like, well, yeah, of course I want more pipeline.
Right.
It's like
right.
things like that. And making it very concise. Like, when I speak to VPs of sales, they tell me one of two things, one being ABC, and, two being, DEF. And then I'm curious, like, does that resonate with you, or you guys are you experiencing this, or did you guys already crack the code? Have a little fun with it and don't take yourself so seriously.
Yeah. And I think there's so much to be said for having one persona that you're spending the day calling into because of that repetition. And so even if you have a call that, guess what? And one of my goals is like, even if it doesn't develop into an opportunity, I want to learn something from the person. So I'm going to ask them some questions. And then what I can do is I can take what I learned there, and now I'm going to take it to my next call. And so I can say to a director of strategic analytics, hey, I was just talking to someone else in a similar role to you, and here are their top 3 priorities. Is that in line, or are you thinking about that differently, and using that to leverage the conversation? From a tool standpoint, there's so much, everyone's talking Chat GPT. People are, using video more and more. What are the things you're seeing? What do you have in the tool belt? What do you think's working, and what do you think is, kind of overhyped at this point?
Yeah. So for me, I use Outreach, Sales Nav, and Zoom Info, and those are the 3 things I use. And I try to keep it super simple. I've tried so many different tools, and what it ends up doing is it just overcomplicates the process for me, and it becomes too much context switching. And so what I love about those 3 tools is like, that's really all I need. And I use Nooks as a dialer, because I want to be able to partition my different sequences, or, base them off, and do it in an automated fashion, where I'm just like pressing start, ring, answer, automate disposition, move on to the next. I don't want to be manual dialing. That's too much, especially when you're the only SDR. Like, you have so many other things to do. You have to be very on point in protecting your time, and outbound calls is just something that has to happen. I don't do video. I think video works for people that want to do it. I've just decided,
with a pretty face like yours, you're not doing video, man?
No, for me, it's just like, I never really, saw the return on investment. Doesn't mean it doesn't work. I did videos, didn't book a meeting. And that was my data test back in 2021. But I've seen a lot of people be really successful with videos. So if that's part of your, your repertoire, and that's something that you do well with, and by all means do it.
Go for it.
Chief data officers, data analytics, data governance, I don't think they're watching a video.
That's not really their vibe. Know your audience. So, hey, going back to planning and protecting your day, like you talked about, like, first of all, you're the top SDR in the company, right? Because you're the only SDR. So you're doing everything. And so it all falls on you. So you got a lot of different things that you're supporting. And then you're still responsible for developing opportunities. How do you plan and protect your day? What's your process for that?
Yeah, I think like before I tried to say yes to everyone, not this company, but like old Landon would say yes to everyone and
Yeah.
have multiple conversations going on, have my hand in so many different pots, which I think is good to build your internal brand, right? But also you lose focus on what's important. And for me today, what I do is I'm very close with my direct manager, my VP of sales or VP of marketing, and we have 2 one-on-ones a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we just talk about the priorities that I'm going to work on this week and just make sure there's alignment and he understands where I'm coming from. We're clear on the goals and what we want to get out of it. And that's what I work on. And when people reach out to me like AEs that want me to do one-off stuff, like I'm always down to listen and talk and hop on a quick call, but I do let them know that like, hey, these is my 1, 2, and 3. I can put some time to this, but it might not be right now. Okay. If you want to help me get started by building a sales nav search at these companies you want me to reach out to, add a few personas and I'll take that and then I'll go add them into sequence on, Wednesday. I'm game for that. And so I'm just more open to being like, hey, like it doesn't fit in right now for what I'm working on. I will get to it. So just like clear communication and whatever's
Yeah.
closest to the money, right? Like I might be in a dialing session, but an inbound comes in, like I'm closing the dialing session. I'm on that inbound, right? Like that's my
Yep.
responsibility. I need to get that person booked for a meeting because that's an inbound. Um, and just so build, I work at partnerships, right? We do a lot of happy hours with different companies for data events, and so I got to go find people and invite them into the happy hours, build the messaging, and get them confirmed. And so we do a lot of these, and we have 12 events this year. I build all the messaging for the events. I go to the events, and then I follow up with the leads, but I make sure to talk to the leads in a way where I know when I'm going to follow up with them on Monday in outreach. I know exactly what I'm going to say, why I'm going to say it, and what's going to be important to them. And so I don't just scan everyone at events. You're only getting a scan if I feel like you'd be a good fit.
Right.
Because I'm going to have to follow up with you. And I don't want to follow up with 7,000 people when I could follow up with 300 people properly.
And I'm guessing it's because of, you've experienced different things in your career, but I think you take kind of a unique degree of ownership in terms of managing up. So like, with your one-on-ones with your manager, with the VP, are you going in? Do you have stats? Do you have an agenda for that? How do you handle that meeting? What would your advice be to people for like successfully managing up when it comes to, you're lucky enough to be meeting with having a one-on-one with a VP, twice a week. How do you interact there, and what tips do you have for that?
Yeah, so we do we're very like asynchronously like talking through Slack through the week. So we kind of
Mhm.
understand how things are going. But when we do meet, it's kind of like, hey, Rich, what do you got for me? Like, what's
Yep.
top of mind for you? What are some updates? How we doing? What's the pulse from my VP? Like, I want to read the room first. And then after that, hey, this is what I'm working on. Like I
Yep.
showed you and I shared this doc with you. These are the accounts I'm going to go after. And this is why I'm going to go after it. I'm going to put 5 to 10 people in. I'm also going to be working on these 2 different things for Amy and partnerships. Is there anything else you'd want to add, or should I reprioritize this? Which ones do you think is more important? And that way he has full buy-in on where I'm spending my time, and there's just the visibilities there.
Yeah. And then how about with the AEs? Because I know a lot of SDRs like, hey, they're aspiring to get to that AE role. They feel like anything that the AE tells them they have to do. But you're actually taking a little bit, it's a 1 to 5, there's only one of you. And so you're spread across 5 AEs, but you're sharing with them like, hey, I'd love to help you, but here are my top 3 priorities. If you want to do this in sales now for me, then yeah, I'm happy to call on it and execute. But it's much more collaborative. You're putting some of it on them instead of just being a dumping ground for admin work and things like that from an AE. How has that worked? Is that pretty? Are they pretty receptive to that? Have you gotten pushback, or how do you manage through that?
Yeah, I mean, each AE is different, right? And
Yep.
different ages, right? Different amount of skill sets too, right? We have one AE that's, really a VP of sales in EMEA that's acting as AE. So though my conversations with him are going to be way different than my conversations with an AE that's been an AE for 2 years, right? It's just different. There's that different level of not so much respect, but like, hey, like you're kind of like, you're a VP. So like I will, say yes to you more often, and I will just it's a different tone when you're talking to a
Yep.
VP, right? I'm not going to sit there and bark orders or say I'm not doing this. It's like, I'll prioritize this. If a VP is telling me to do something, like if there's if it makes sense on the way they're explaining it, like I'll definitely cross check it with my boss and my VP. but like there's importance there, right? Like that's it's a VP level stature in another account, and it's hard working in me. It's different time zones, so I have to schedule my sends to go at 11:30 p.m. at night. You know, sometimes I got to wake up a little bit early to like check the responses so I can get them booked, speed the lead, baby. Yeah, there's some other AEs that like I love all my AEs. They're all just, they're great at like, hey, we have a goal and this is the goal we're trying to get to. We're very aligned on it. Of course, an AE is going to want more meetings, like gonna want more pipeline. It's gonna want me to set it with a higher level person. Or they're like, hey, I'll talk to anyone at that account. That's a huge account. You know, and it's just like, just clear and cut and concise and doing what's best for the company is how we get along. And so I think haven't had any roadblocks, but also I've taken this a lot differently than I would of my old jobs, where I was like, oh, you want me to do this? Of course. What can I do for you? Like, what else can I do? And it would take me away from my like day job, because I'm trying to impress this AE and times that by 4, and their manager and someone from marketing. And I'm taking on this over here. And then people, like 3 months later, like, why did you miss quota? I was like, well, don't you know I was helping all those people? And they're like, no, we didn't know that. And it's because I didn't communicate with anyone. Doing all these one-off tasks that was going to accelerate my career there. I have great relationships with those people, but my manager never knew what I was doing because you know, we didn't talk about it, right? We just, I was like, oh, I'll just do that. And so I've learned over time, it's like, at the end of the day, make sure your manager knows what you're doing.
Yeah. I think that's key. Let's talk a little bit about like your why, and also how you kind of keep balancing things. And so one of the things you just wrote recently on LinkedIn, and I'm paraphrasing, but it was, you know, hey, I'd rather be a pesky SDR than a broke dad. Did I generally get that right? Or
no,
talk to me what was behind that. You mentioned, you know, I mean, and I'll tell you, man, I think one of the toughest things I've ever had to do in my life and my career was like, when I got laid off and having to walk, you know, go home and look at my wife and look at the kids, and just that moment of sheer terror of like, everyone's counting on me. How am I going to figure this out? That's tough. But talk to me a little bit about what that's like for you and how you balance that.
Yeah, I mean, I think a little bit of it's just I have a chip on my shoulder, right? Like I grew up parents that struggle with addiction. Like I didn't have all the things I wanted. And so money is, I have a funky relationship with money, obviously. But when I hear my kids, like one's 5 and one's 1, so it's not really there yet, but that's why it's so important for me to get the foundation now. So like, you know, when things like cheer camp or want to go stay at their friend's house, or, you know, want to go school shopping or get new clothes, like I can't remember how many times in my life, like I was always told like, oh no, we don't have money for that. And I just don't want that to come out of my mouth. I want them to be appreciative and grateful for all the things that we have, that because we're, you know, better off than a percentage of people. But like, I don't want, if I want to say yes and they deserve it and they've been, you know, a great kid and all the things are aligning and it's something that I want to say yes to, I don't want my pocketbook to be the reason I have to say no. And so the job of SDR is very hard, right? We get stuck in these ruts where it's like 3 days, no meeting. And so I get persistent, and sometimes I'm wondering, am I too persistent? You know, am I too like in their face? And like, there's a fine line where you have to draw it, where you're not like reaching out multiple times a day, but like, if I notice someone reads my email 5 times, like I'm sending them an email, right? And I'm going to call them. Like, it's my job to see if you're interested in this. If you want to tell me no, that's fine. I'll be respectful of that. But like, you're not answering the phone. You're not answering an email. There's no LinkedIn. You're at my target account. You're the ICP that buys our product. I need to know if this is something that's in line for you right now, and if you're experiencing these problems. And so I might be a little bit more persistent. And so that's how I tie those together. It's like, yeah, I'm going to be persistent. I'm going to get this call, because the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? Like, you get them on the phone. They're like, hey, sorry about that. Like, you know, I've just been so busy, but yes, I want to look at this. Can we set up some time? And that's what I keep in my mind. I'm like, that kind of conversation could happen so many times, but we want to make assumptions that we're bothering them. And it's not that we're bothering them. It's that they just don't have time for this, and they weren't looking at this, and this wasn't on their roadmap. And you're a Series A, you're not on Gartner. Like, you have 35 customers. Like, why would they come directly looking for you? You kind of have to illuminate that to them and be the pesky one that kind of gets them on a call with your AE and let that go the way it needs to go.
Yeah, I think that, you know, that almost evangelical sale mentality. When you know your product, when you know your ICP, and you have a strong belief, that can carry you so far. And I think you embody that. So, and at the end of the day, when you've got a motivate, you got motivation number one and motivation number two, running around the house and getting bigger every day, that helps keep you going. And then, you talked about addiction. We've talked a little bit like of burnout and stress and all those things that everyone's dealing with. And you live in one of the most beautiful places around, down in Santa Cruz. My wife went to school there. She's a banana slug. How do you balance it? How do you keep yourself stay grounded and find some calm in a really stressful job? What are your techniques there?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, right? Like, you have to have a good support system. You got to have people like, I'm lucky that I have a family, right? So like, they keep me grounded, right? So like, when I walk out of here, I get to go spend time with them, and I realize the work I did today is going to help in the future some way. I don't know exactly how, but it's going to compound, because that's how SDR work. That's how it works. And so I think it comes back down to, did you do the things you needed to do during the day so that when you close your computer, you can mentally go enjoy your family? Or did you slack off, didn't do the things you needed to do, but you're still closing the computer and you're going to handle it tomorrow? Because if it's that way, then it interferes with how like present you can be with your family, because you're thinking about, oh no, like I didn't make my 50 calls today, or I didn't reach out to 25 new prospects. Like, now I'm going to be behind tomorrow. And now the stress is coming up and I'm feeling it in my like heartburn. And now my daughter's trying to play with me and I'm looking on LinkedIn trying to book a meeting or something. And it's like, I think it's like time management, right? Like, when you're at work, be at work, kill it, do what you need to do. So when you're off work, I leave work in the room. Like, yeah. So that's kind of like how
close the door on it. Yeah. That's cool. So you mentioned, that idea, and it kind of reminds me of the Gary Vaynerchuk book of jab, 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 hook, and give, give, give. And one of the things you're doing is you're doing some coaching and some teaching as part of Pavilion now, correct?
Yep. Yeah. I've been on, this will be my third SDR Academy that teaching with Kyle Coleman. So it's been pretty cool experience.
Yeah. What is that like? And tell a little bit about what's entailed in that SDR Academy through Pavilion.
Yeah. So, I mean, Kyle Coleman puts on an 8-week course and basically just runs you through the gamut of like what you need to know to be successful as an SDR. And it's like each week, a different person comes in and teaches a course. I think this next one I'm teaching time management or time blocking, calendar blocking, whatever it might be. And it's 90 minutes and we get in the weeds and we talk about not only like what you need to do, but like what's the ideology behind it. Like, what do you need to look out for? Like, what happens if you don't do this? And breaking down like, how you spend your day. Some people are very good using a calendar and some people don't need it. So like, it really just depends on the type of person you are, but it's been really cool. I got that from posting on LinkedIn, and Florin one day, I don't know, I honestly don't know how I got introduced. I think it was through Florin to the head of VP and Learn over there. Back in August of last year. And so I've been with them doing that. And I have a community of 250 SDRs, and it's called the Prospecting Club. It's a Slack group. And we share cold calls that worked, recordings, and like good email templates. We talk about all the things that, we don't want to talk about with our bosses or things like that. And that's been really cool to have that community and leading that up. And, I built a course for social selling, and I just learned along the way that like I'm not a big like side hustle, want to like project my courses on you kind of thing. So I stopped it. I think I started the course in August, built it out. The whole goal was to pay for Mila's daycare because she was going to a free daycare, and then that got shut down to the government, and then we had to take her to another one, which was going to be $12K, and I wasn't ready for that. So I built this course on how I went from 0 to 10,000 followers in 3 months. And then I sold it and made $12,000. And then I stopped selling it and was able to I just give it away for free now.
Cool. Well, so you give a ton back, but so if people want to follow you, if they join Pavilion, they can take that SDR class. If they're on LinkedIn, you're really prominent there. Any other places people should go to check you out and keep up with what you're doing?
That's it.
That's it.
Yeah, LinkedIn, Landon Meyer. I think it's like / pipeline cures all, and you'll find me there. And yeah, DM me if you want to chat about anything. I love talking SDR, or if you're a dad and you got kids, also something I like talking about as well.
Well, hey man, thanks for being so generous and taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Brian.